So we're going on with the book Silas Marner, and the story thickens. It's actually a pretty exciting book as you go through and you think, wow, what's going to happen to Silas Marner? He's coming from this past that he has been treated so horrifically, and into his presence, which he was a marginal cocoon like character, ghostly figure, and now the whole city of Revenlow is focused on Silas Marner. So we got down to where they were having the New Year's Eve party and describing the party of Godfrey and Nancy talking as music's in the background in the midst what is happening on the outside. It's snowing, it's New Year's Eve, and we have another dead-like figure, another a ghostly figure coming into the situation. And guess who it was? Godfrey's wife, Molly, is walking in the snow to interrupt this New Year's Eve party of Godfrey's. Godfrey being her husband. She has not wanted to divorce, not wanted to have annulment. And so she's coming there to say, hey, I have his ring and I am his wife, when he wants to marry Nancy. Ugh. So he's walking through the snow, carrying the baby, she's walking in the snow, carrying this baby. The baby is, younger than 2 years old, around, younger than 2. And as she's walking, it's described of the baby's dingy rags, this hungry child. And of course, she is very much high on opium, or the drug opium has affected her, so she's sick. She's sick. She needs money. She needs money for her drug problem. But this little child is in the midst of it. So as she's walking through around 7 o'clock, this freezing wind's blowing, and she's trying to come to this red house where they're all gathered, partying for New Year's Eve. And she has to stop. It's freezing. She stops. She stops next to where Silas Marner lives. Of course, Silas Marner is not at this party. Silas Marner is home in the stone house. And so what happens? We see this toddler. The mother collapses. This toddler comes, toddling in to Silas's house, hiding amidst in the corners of Silas Marner's house. So he sees next to where his money usually sat, he sees gold. And he thinks, what is this? Am I having a mirage? Am I seeing, what are this gold? And as he looks, they're curls. And he looks a little closer. It's a sleeping child. A child has found a corner in Silas Marner's house and is sleeping. He thinks, am I in a bad dream? Is this my little sister that died? Who is this? And so he looks and he thinks, and then as the child awakes, he feeds the child some of his porridge there. And he takes the child on his knees. And then the child gets off his knees and starts walking, trying to lead him to where her mother was outside. They come upon Molly, and yes, you guessed it, Molly had died. This is some story, isn't it? So he's thinking, oh my goodness, what has happened? So he has to go and tell everyone, there's a woman outside. I think she might be dead. So he going to the red house, he interrupts and says, there's a woman. I think she might be dead. Again, we have this ghostly figure of Marner, Silas Marner, but now he is alive, showing, and he has this little girl with him, this little baby with him. And the baby is clinging on to Silas there, clinging on to him. And basically they see this dead mother. Well, who's in the party? You can guess it. We have Godfrey there, and he wants to marry Nancy, but he knows, who is this woman with the long dark hair? Who is this woman in rags? This woman that has a wedding ring on? Of course, it's his wife, not even his ex-wife, his wife that he's married with. And so he sees this little baby, and Godfrey's like, well, we need to get this baby clothes, and he tries to become like, who is this woman, when he knows that this woman was his wife. And as we go on to chapter 14, it starts out with basically burial. They're burying a pauper's burial. in this burial, not knowing who this woman Molly is, they're burying this unknown woman. Silas, this child of this woman is still hanging on to Silas Marner. And he's managed it. The Dolly has come out. Dolly, Silas's friend, has come out and decided. Remember, Molly and Dolly. Molly is the lady that died, and Dolly is Silas's friend, and with Aaron, his son. And so Dolly and Aaron come and to help him with this child. And actually a lot of the women of Ravenlow come and say, okay, we'll help for the poor orphan. She's a very beautiful child with beautiful gold curls. And they're like, we'll help. And Silas, of course, he's thinking, oh, his money is gone, but he thinks, well, maybe God sent this child, to replace, my money. And so we have here, in fact, it says that Dolly said, you'd think, anybody would think the angels in heaven couldn't be prettier than this little girl. And so the women of the town, they want to help Silas Marner, taking and adopting her as his child, but they would help all together. And whatever was needed, the gates were down, of course, and everyone wanted to help Silas Marner. And of course, we have Silas Marner in his trances, and that becomes an issue, but not really, because the town is watching and making sure, and they all look at Silas Marner differently now, as a man's heart, and wanting, and of course Dolly comes in and says, you need to bring up this child like a christened folks child, you need to go to church with this child. And so Silas Marner, his heart is changed. He wants this little girl to go to church. He wants her to be christened. He wants to give her a Christian name. He wants to name her Hephzibah. Hephzibah? Dolly says, that's not a Bible name. He said, yes, it is. My mother's name was Hephzibah, and my little sister that died, her name was Hephzibah. And then Dolly says, well, how do you say that, Hephzibah? And he said, no, we just call her Eppie. So now we have this little girl being Eppie and bring new joy to Marner's life and taking her out, looking for herbs. You have pictures of her in the meadows with Silas, and Silas so happy that he's raising this little girl. And even the point of discipline, because Dolly says you need to discipline her. Probably you need to, maybe if she acts like that, she acts like she took his scissors and he fastened her to his loom because he didn't want her to go anyplace. And so she found his scissors and cut it, and she went outside, and Silas was like, where is she? He was so scared. He's running around, and finally he finds her by the pond, and she's just putting her feet in the pond. He thinks, oh my goodness, here you are. And he was so full of love and kissing her, so full of love, thinking that he had lost her. And she was just smiling. And basically Dolly says, you're going to have to put her in the coal hole, put her in isolation, like put her in the corner. So he tried doing that. But what happened with Eppie is she liked it. She thought he was playing hide and seek with her. And she said, Daddy, let's go into the, Eppie want to go into coal hole again, so Silas, he just couldn't hardly discipline her because he loved her so much. And it says his life became a bright land of angel wings, and hand in hand with a little child was like him being with an angel. So we go on to chapter 15. The last part before we go on to part 2 of this book. And basically what happened with Godfrey. The time goes on, and Godfrey gets married, of course, to Nancy. Now he doesn't have to worry about his wife coming, Molly, again, and nobody knows that she was his wife. And then he knows about this is his little girl, but he doesn't claim his little girl. He just should he give his birthright? No, he doesn't want to bring any of that up because he's afraid that Nancy will not marry him if she knew that this little girl, Eppie, was really his daughter. So he lets Silas Marner raise Eppie and doesn't tell anyone. And then, of course, where did Dunsey go? Well, we don't know. People thought, well, maybe he went off as a soldier somewhere because Dunsey doesn't come back. That's when we get to chapter 16, which is the last part of part 2. 16 years later. The whole book jumps to 16 years later. And this little girl, Eppie, she's 18 years old. So she's old enough to think for herself. Well, Godfrey Cass now is her dad, but he's 40 years old, and he's married to Nancy. And Nancy is a beauty at 40 years old, and she's a sweet, sweet lady to be married into her family, and her family is a sweet family, we find out. But Godfrey still has his secret, doesn't he? And Silas, what does he look like? Of course, he's 55 years old, kind of bent over from doing all of his weaving. And Eppie's beautiful with auburn hair curls and so exciting. Anyone to be around Eppie would be so excited because she is full of energy and full of energy. She says, Daddy, can we have a garden? Maybe we could we can buy it or get it from the Casses, which is Godfrey. Maybe we could get, Daddy, we could get this garden. And so she invites her close friend, Aaron. Of course, remember Aaron before was singing hymns and singing things way back when, Dolly's son, who is about 2 years older than her. And so he comes and he says, yes, he'll dig in the garden. Of course, we know Aaron. He's in love with Eppie. He loves Eppie, and Eppie, she loves him. She thinks the world of Aaron. And so going on, we have this going on, Eppie thinking and Aaron, coming and thinking about, marrying a peasant boy, really, that she would be marrying a peasant boy, her being a peasant girl. Let her real father, Godfrey Cass is a wealthy, wealthy man now living in the red house. He's the squire now, of course, and his wife, very well known. And the next, it comes to the point. It kind of skips around here. And we have going on the contrast between the church of Ravenlow and Silas's old life. So Silas sits down with Dolly. And Dolly and Aaron, remember Aaron, and he discusses Dolly asking him questions on what was with your life, Silas? What was with your life? And you can see how she talks in there. It's, she talks with the peasant slang, and as she's talking, she tells her that nobody cared for him, that his own friend had worked ruin in his life. And he told about William and what had happened back in his other lifetime at the other church. And Dolly says, but he was a bad one. He's a bad one. He was a bad one. You don't have to say that everyone's bad just because he was bad, So Dolly's telling, and he tells about the drawing of lots. And then Dolly comes and she talks to him about the drawing of lots. How that was not God. That God just did not throw us away. He says, you need to go on trusting. You shouldn't have run away. God wants you to come back to him. So we have this time of Dolly actually presenting him to return to his first love in God. That's a very sweet chapter. And going on, we see Eppie. And Eppie, wants to know about her parents, but she doesn't want to know everything. She knew her mother had died in the wedding ring. So at the stone pit, there's a picture of they're sitting at the stone pit. Now, remember, this is the stone pit where actually Dunsey had gone to the stone pit right there. And they're at the stone pit. And they're kind of looking around. It's beautiful. And then she starts talking about the wedding ring. And she tells Marner how she would love to marry Aaron and that he has asked her many times. So we see here that we have Marner thinking, oh, well, okay, that would be great. But then thinking, well, then now, I won't see you. And she says, no, you're going to be part of our family. Of course, we're going to take care of you. Daddy, we love you. So, and what a beautiful picture, that was. And then going on to chapter 7, it kind of switches over to a tea at the Red House. And now we have this tea going on between Nancy and Priscilla at the Red House. Nancy being married to Godfrey, remember? and Nancy and her sister Priscilla, who has never been married, and we see her being very sad because she hasn't been able to have children. They've been married for what, 15 years, and no children. And she actually lost a child at birth. We see her talking about it, and she's very sad that she never adopted children, and thinking about what, and then even looking at the weaver's child, looking at Silas Marner, the little girl that he adopted, thinking, wow, maybe I should adopted an orphan like Silas did. And then we have Godfrey thinking maybe he should have adopted her too, but he never told about his secret that she was his daughter. And basically both of them kind of dissatisfied that they haven't been able to have children. And we go on to chapter 18, and this is a great shocker of a chapter. In this chapter, we have Godfrey coming and running in the house. A great shock has happened. What has happened? What has happened? Dunsey has been found. Remember, he's the one that stole Silas's money, and he's the drunken that fell with wildfire when the horse died. This is that bad man. Well, it's 16 years have passed, and they found him as the stone pit that is wedged in and everything. The water had become so low that they found a skeleton, and this skeleton definitely was Dunstan's skeleton, because he had the whip that was labeled with Godfrey's name on it, and he also had not only that, he had the recognition of his money and his seals, and he also had another thing. He had a bag of money, and it was Silas's money. So here we have Godfrey coming to see his wife. Great shock. And he's telling Nancy what happened, and his tears are falling down. He can't believe his brother has done this. And now he has to go talk to Silas about it, and all these things. And in the midst of this, he confesses. What does he confess to? What does he confess to? You got it. He's confessing to what had happened, and that Eppie was really his daughter. Nancy is floored. At first, she is so upset. Why didn't you want to raise your own daughter? Thinking, what in the world? Why didn't you tell me? Because I thought you would not marry me. So they have this big confrontation going on. And as going from that point, we have them coming to Silas' door. Knock, knock, knock. Silas Marner. Silas Marner had got his money back. They had brought him his money. But basically, Godfrey had come because Nancy decided, well, we should now take and adopt, even though she's 18 years old, we should adopt your daughter, Eppie, and bring her into our family and raise her in the high classes of things, make her rich, and she can become, and I'll take care of her, and she can be part of our family and be away from the peasants now. What do you think's going to happen? Knock, knock, knock at Silas's door, and Silas answers, and of course, Eppie's 18 years old. She can decide things on her own at this time, but Nancy and Godfrey come to Silas, saying, and him telling the story that we want Eppie to be our daughter because she is my daughter. She is my daughter. That was my wife that died, the pauper that died that night. And now I want to have my daughter back, and I have a claim to her. And Silas says, then, sir, why didn't you say so 16 years ago, instead of coming to me now, when now you might as well take out my heart than take away my daughter? And so Godfrey says, well, I have repented now. And Silas says, but repentance doesn't alter what has been going on for 16 years. You have kept this secret. And Godfrey says, she can still be near you. She's at the age now she can choose. I need to talk to her, and I can make her very wealthy and very well off. And it's my duty to insist now that I can have my daughter back. So then Epi comes, and Silas says, Epi, here you need to talk. And then Godfrey explains that he's her father, and he wants to make things right with money and give her all this inheritance and bring her in as his only child. And Nancy says, yes, you will be a treasure for me, and I'll give you everything. And so Epi, what does she do? She runs over and grabs onto Silas's hand. And she says, thank you, sir, for your offer. And it's far above what I can imagine, but I can think of no other happiness here but to be with my father here. Nobody shall ever come between us. I only have one father, and it was Silas. So Silas in his tears knows that Epi has chosen him as that father. And she says, and I'm promised to marry a working man. And I do not need your money, basically, she was saying. She says, I don't want to be a fancy lady. Thank you all the same. Wow. Huh. So what happens then? So Godfrey goes back and says, that's ended. Nancy says, gave up hope of having a daughter and cannot believe that she has turned away. But then she says, basically, this is what happens, that you have turned away from a blessing of your life, this daughter, and now it has fallen on another, fallen on Silas. Godfrey feeling bad, Nancy feeling bad, and not having children. Yet now Godfrey has spent 16 years, not having anything to do with his true daughter. So the last chapter. I'm going to go through this. I know we're going on, but the last chapter is this trip. Well, actually not the last, second to last chapter, was a trip of Silas. He decides to go back to his old country, Lantern Yard. Remember? Where that pastor in that church had drew lots and kicked him out, where he was accused of robbery when he didn't do it, and how he had went away from God at that point. He brings his daughter there, Epi there, and Epi sees it's totally changed, and he could hardly find out where he even lived. And he sees where the prison street is and the jail is, and Epi says, this is a dark and ugly place. Worse than a workhouse. I'm glad you don't live here. In fact, it even smells. People are living so close together and it smells bad. And then he found out where the church was, and the church was totally gone, and now it was a factory. Lantern Yard was gone, and no pastor, nobody he knew, not a single person there. And Silas basically thinks, well, that's the end of the era. My past is totally gone. He says, since the child was sent to me, I've come to love her as myself. I had light enough to trust, and now he's trusting God. Now she says she'll never leave me, and I think I shall trust until I die, because God gave me her. What a magnificent story. The last conclusion. I'm going to rush through this, but you can read that last. It's a wedding. Yes, you got it. It's a wedding, a beautiful wedding where Epi is married to Aaron. Aaron, that young boy singing at Christmas carols back when, and loving her. And he wants to be a gardener. So he's building this beautiful garden for her. And Dolly, Silas's friend Dolly, and her husband are walking behind in the bridal procession as Aaron is their child. And on the outskirts, we see Godfrey Cass is gone. He decided to go to a different town to be away from this situation. But Priscilla, which Nancy told Godfrey not to tell anybody. And so nobody knew besides Silas and Epi that Epi was his daughter. And so Priscilla says, well, I wish Nancy could have had a child like that. Look how beautiful she is. And Mr. Lamater said, yes, indeed. I wish Nancy could have had a daughter like that. And so as they stop, they shake hands with Mr. Macy, very old in the beginning. He was younger, and he was the one, in the Rainbow Lodge that calmed Silas down, shaking his hand, and he smiles. And everyone in town was talking about the wedding of Silas's daughter with Aaron. Everyone there saying, oh, she brought blessing to Silas's life. And Epi says, oh, Father, what a pretty home our is. No one could be more happier than we are, can they, Father? And then Silas thinks that his losses that brought him to town to find his relationship back with the Lord and to give him the treasure, the greatest treasure that he had found, was this little toddler that came into his life, Epi. How wonderful. So now I'm going to do a little bit about the author's life, and then you'll know that's the end of the story.